have a question. What is your favorite song and how do you connect with it? Is it when you fell in love or through something really difficult? I'm your host, Tiffany Mason. Now join me as I interview others and we take a walk down memory lane with them. Let's get lost in why that music matters to them. Turn up your radio and let's explore Memories with a Beat. Hello, Podcast Land. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Memories with a Beat. And today I have Rob Walsh with me. And while that may not be a big name for you, it's a huge name for me. In the podcast space, we have these podcast hosts, and that's how all of our awesome episodes get to come out to you guys. It's through our podcast host. And one of the top podcast hosts is Libsyn, and that is where I choose to have my podcast live. But there's lots of others that you may have heard of. Anyways, so Libsyn is where my podcast lives, and Rob Walsh is the one that lots of times when I reach out, I have a question, I reach out to Rob, and he has a co-host, Elsie Escobar, who is one of the co-hosts for She Podcast. I was listening to their podcast and Rob was ending their episode. And normally I listen to the feed from Libsyn for staying up to date with everything that's interesting and, latest industry standards and best practices and what's going on, who bought who, and what all of the commotion is about. And when they were ending their episode, Rob said something about, I'd love to be on other podcasts. And I was thinking, oh, shoot, I can't have him on my podcast because it's about music. And then he said something about, I think, basketball. And I was like, oh, so he wants to just chat. So he sang a song, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But it really enticed me and actually gave me a flood of memories. So I'm going to ask you, Rob, to introduce yourself a little bit. I know I've already said a little bit about you, but give us more.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm just excited to talk to you in person. I know I've emailed you a ton of questions, but now it's time to dive in and learn a little bit more about you.
Tiffany, well, thank you for having me on the show. And as you mentioned, I'm with Libsyn, and I've been in the podcasting space now since 2004. So 18 plus years
Forever.
and
Yeah.
a long time. So this has been fun. And yeah, at the end of the episode of the feed,
Mhm.
I said, yeah, have me on and just love to talk and about whatever. It didn't have to be anything. And then you offered up about song, and I was like, oh, well, your podcast sounds interesting. I would love to be a guest on it. And so yeah, we're here to talk about my background with music and the song that I would think is probably one of the most influential songs in my life because of how it changed me to introduce me to an artist that I probably wouldn't have heard of for a few more years. But then just if anyone has an artist where they listen to almost everything that artist does, that's me in this story.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, I am really intrigued because I've never heard this song before. So I would love to know how your path crossed with it.
Mhm.
So if you don't mind, indulge us a little bit about the song, how you connect to it, how you were introduced to it, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, so a little backstory. I was one of those people that grew up in the 80s, graduated high school in 84. And so that puts a little dating on me. And I was in a household where my mom didn't believe in cable. They didn't have cable when I lived in the house. They didn't get it until many years after I moved out.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I didn't have MTV, didn't have any of that. If I saw MTV, it would be over a friend's house or something like that. And I started
Uh-huh.
working at a pizza place in January 1983, my junior year, and they had a TV up there, and we would have MTV up on that TV, and I'd be working it late at night and be folding boxes and watching MTV. It was like my first real chance to watch MTV. And this
I was gonna say, how did you get any work done? Because it was so popular at the time. I have to imagine that you were like, oh my gosh, MTV, it's like kids with their iPads now, right?
Right. I mean, that was it's like, well, we had to fold boxes for the pizza place, and I was just
Yeah.
any excuse to get out and fold the boxes, I'll fold more. So after my shifts, we had lots of boxes folded because I would sit there and fold the boxes and I could watch a TV, or I'd be doing
Right.
other cleaning things where I'd be out in the front of the store where the television was. Any excuse to get up there and watch it. And I had just finished reading a book, The Clash of the Titans, and I was a kind of a big D&D guy,
Okay.
so I was a nerd. But I just finished reading Clash of the Titans. I'm
Hmm.
starting here, and this video comes on, and it's "Don't Pay the Ferryman," and in Clash of the Titans, there was this whole thing about the ferryman and don't pay the ferryman, and I was like, this song totally connected to a book I had just read, and it's on being played on MTV over and over again because it was a video that was pretty good, well done video in the early days when a lot of the videos weren't so well done. And that song introduced me to Krista Berg, and now when I hear it, it brings me back to working at the pizza place, back to my high school days, but it was my whole introduction to Krista Berg, which then I went out and bought, like, any other album he had done up to that point, and a couple years later, he released, Into the Light. That was in 1986, so this is 1982, so, like, 4 years later or 83, so, like, 3 years later, he releases Into Light, which is then Lady in Red, which becomes mega hit, and then
Yeah,
everybody knows who he is, but I'm like, "Hey, I know who this guy is, I have every one of his albums." I had to go search through used record stores and buy tapes to find the albums that he had made that no one had heard, and it was a kind of a turning point because up until that listening to Krista Berg, I had been Led Zeppelin, Aerosmith, Van Halen, Pink Floyd. That was my music, and
right.
I still like that. But what I listen to now, when I want to chill, when I'm traveling, when I want to do coding, or when I'm working, it's Krista Berg. And
Interesting.
so that is how I got introduced and into my Krista Berg fetish, I guess you'd say. I'm one of those. Krista Berg is to me what Mel Torme was to Harry from A Night Court, to date myself.
Okay, very good. Now, I am intrigued by this working at the pizza place because I
Mhm,
too worked at a pizza place. That was my first job.
mhm.
Um, and I feel like when I think about any of those memories, I mean, does Parmesan cheese just come back to your brain? The
What
smell?
comes back to my brain, so some of it is, I had to mix the sauce,
Okay.
and you did it in a big vat, and you would pour in, like, these 6 big cans of paste, 6 big cans of sauce, and you'd pour in the water, but the cans of paste and sauce were kept near the back wall in an unheated storage area, so all I remember is my arm going numb, reaching in, mixing the sauce because you reached in with your arm in this big vat to mix it. Yes, folks. Um,
Oh,
Yes, you
gross.
reached in with your arm and you had to get in there with your hands, just and then you would take it and you would, like, wipe it off your arm. So, yes, think of all the hair coming off.
They should have used those gloves, you watch the
Mhm. Oh, this is
Science
the
Channel?
'80s.
I know,
Yeah,
those
no, no.
ones, the gloves that they put on to, like, help the cows give birth?
Yeah, no, no. There was no gloves, making sandwiches, you made
Yikes.
subs with hand yeah,
Yeah,
wipe your sweat off your forehead and
just
wipe it on
yeah.
your pants and then
Okay, now I
go make
wanna
this up.
know, when you would buy the tapes, were you the person that had to, like, open up the leaflet and learn all the words, or were you just happy for, like, the music and you got the tape and you were, like, so excited just to listen to it?
I was so excited to listen to it, I would listen to it over and over and over. I mean, mm, different parts of my life come back to me based on which album I had found at which time. So, like, some albums I didn't like there was one of his early albums, I think it was, Crusader, which I never
Mm.
found until later, in, like, the early '90s. But other ones like Eastern Wind and The Perfect Day, those I had found early on. Some I found as tape, some I found as record. If they were record, then I would record them onto tape so I could listen to them. And I'm like one of those people that just overdoes everything. So I would listen to it over and over and over. Some of the songs I was looking in my iTunes, now Apple Music, how many times I've listened
Yeah.
some of the songs from Krista Berg over 100 times
Oh
plus.
my gosh, and that's just really
Yeah.
Apple iTunes days. Right.
Yeah, yeah, and that was when I got everything transferred over to Apple iTunes, so I got everything into the computer, I had CDs, and I had to go back and find CDs on stuff to get it in there for the ones that I didn't have, as time went on, so I still have, like, a lot of them. I have both the albums or the tape and then the CD or the digital, um, so
Were
yeah.
you the kid that, like, you would bring your tape with you in your friend's car and be like, "Dude, you gotta check this out," and then did your friends like
No, I
it?
didn't do that with Krista
No.
Berg, that was, like, my quiet little
Okay.
secret.
I wondered.
I never because it's he's not the most manly one. It's not like you go, "Dudes, listen to this." It
Right.
was like, okay, this was what I introduced, like, girlfriends and wife
Right.
to, but not. It was a part of me that I didn't open up to dude friends. This was only to girlfriends or significant others that would get to hear the Chris de Burgh. And ultimately, my wife and I were married many years, and I always wanted to go see him in concert. And for our 20th anniversary, we go and we get tickets. We're going to go out, fly up to Canada to go to a concert because he's going through Canada. And
Hey, Podcast Land, I have another question for you. Would you like to learn for free how to get more downloads of your podcast? Social media is not our friend, and I want to show you how to repurpose your podcast episodes to virtually amplify your podcast presence by taking bite-sized pieces out of each episode and getting more exposure. I've created a workshop just for you, my fellow podcasters, titled The Down Low on Downloads. Go to virtuallyuva.com and get it for free. The link is in the show notes. Pause this episode, get it open in your browser, and tonight, when you're winding down from the day, you can check it out. Don't go another month wanting more downloads, but struggling to figure out how. This is how. And it's totally free. For now.
Two days before I pull out the passports, my wife's passport's expired. I hadn't checked it.
No.
Did not check it. So we had canceled the trip. We didn't get to see him at that point. Now, I think it was a year later. It was 2 years later. He came to Montreal, and we flew up to Montreal and was able to finally see him live in concert.
Oh my goodness.
But yes.
Oh, I cannot imagine the disappointment. I would have loved to see the looks on your faces. Like,
I mean, this was like, okay, I've got this great romantic 20th anniversary, wedding anniversary thing. We were going to be in downtown was Winnipeg, and we were going to be there for a weekend plus, and had all this stuff planned, and wah, wah, wah. It's a bucket list item.
Oh,
And it was like the first time I finally got to see him in concert, and yeah, have that yanked out.
oh gosh. Now, okay, so you said that sometimes you listen to this when you want to chill. So do you have I know you do a ton of traveling. Do you have like a playlist when you're on the airplane and this is on that, or is it on every playlist? When do you,
I have a couple.
cue this song up?
Yeah, I have a couple playlists for him. I have an upbeat or a where I want to kind of just more of I want to downbeat it, where I want to be more sad type music. Like
Yeah.
there's a song on The Getaway, which Don't Pay the Ferryman came out, called I'm Counting on You. And there's some other songs that are really sweet and piano melodies and more melodies. And if I'm just trying to get in a different mindset, that's what I want. If I need to get fired up, then there's other songs like High on Emotion and things like that, which is also connected with me because I'm someone that has been sober my whole life, and there's a song that he releases that's High on Emotion. It's like almost my theme song, which again, just as I said, when you look at my life and the music, his music dominates it.
Interesting. Almost like his soundtracks are the soundtrack to your life.
Yeah, and different albums from different stages of my life, going through college, after college, first job, having kids. So different things. I equate different albums to different parts of my life.
Right, that makes sense. Does your wife have the same appreciation for Chris de Burgh that you do?
I don't think anybody does. There might be a few people on the fan boards that have the appreciation that I have. There's a few other fanatics like that, but she likes Chris de Burgh. So, and his music is very spiritual, and she's very very religious. So she likes that part of it as well.
Yeah.
Which is also different. I went to a Catholic college, but I wasn't Catholic, and he was singing this music, which is kind of very religious in ways. I mean, his early albums were one was called The Crusader.
Okay.
I mean, so that just gives you a little bit feel there for what his music's like. And he's very much a storyteller.
I love that. I love a good story in a song. I always say that I just think it's incredible that in 3 minutes people can take you from getting married to having kids to you're retiring and now you're dying and your kid is, getting ready to say goodbye to you. I love that about a song. So I appreciate that too, that the stories that go along in our songs that we choose to cling to a little bit. So when I went in, I always try to listen to the song before I, talk to somebody about it. I was listening to the song, and for whatever reason, it felt very theatrical, or I could see it in a musical of some sort, way, or fashion. Which then, of course, made me think of the song when I heard you on the episode that and ultimately made me reach out to you. But you were singing "Putting on the Ritz," which reminded me of my high school days. And I just had a flood of memories come back to me. So shout out to Urbandale Choir, class of 98. We had such a good time, but that was one of the songs we performed was Putting on the Ritz. So you started kind of like mumble singing it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I know this song. I know this song. Wait a minute. I was like, oh my gosh, we sung this song in show choir. So I thought it was super funny. I appreciate you, bearing your soul and singing that song on the podcast for all of us listening. And I didn't know, did you want to perform that for us again on this episode?
Oh, no, I would not do that again to your audience. Here's how bad my voice is. So I've done karaoke one time.
Yeah.
And shocker, it was Lady in Red by Krista Berg.
Yeah, you got it.
Right. And I did it, and it was in a bar that was on the side of a casino. And when I did it, my voice is so bad. At the end, everyone had stopped gambling, stopped on the slot machines, had walked over to the edge of the bar, and were standing there looking at me in shock and, oh my, what is that I'm hearing? Like, it was so bad. And then there was like muffled clap. And it was like, I was so bad, I got people to stop gambling. That was because Lady in Red's not easy to sing. And, Christopher has got this great voice and he can hit these high notes.
Right.
And no, I mutilated it. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. He had a migraine that day and he didn't know why.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I love Lee Greenwood, God bless the USA. And so I thought karaoke was a perfect opportunity to try my hand at this song. And so I got up there, and if it makes you feel any better, in the middle of my performance, I apologize. It was also so bad that I felt the need to apologize to the audience that I was putting them through it. Now, I did not shut down the casino or stop people from gambling, but I'm sure people were very pleased when my song was finished. I actually met another podcaster from Pennsylvania, and he was coming down to Podfest this past spring, or I guess summer, really. And well, I guess on the verge of summer. And he and I met up. He has a karaoke podcast. And so I was like, oh my God, we totally have to meet. Let's do some karaoke, and I meant him do some karaoke because that's his whole podcast and everything about him, right? And then he's like, no, you're doing karaoke with me. And I was like, no, I didn't agree to that. And he's like, yeah, you reached out to me and said, we totally have to go do karaoke together. And I was like, I did say that. So then he proceeded to pick a song up for me to perform on my own. Beautiful thing about karaoke, though, if you have a really good KJ, which I learned that from another episode that I did where I had a karaoke jockey come onto my podcast, they will sing along with you and carry you a little bit. So I picked Tracy Chapman.
I don't think anyone has a back that strong for me.
Oh God. Well, I needed it and I was very thankful for it. So if you ever get enough courage to try it one more time, and maybe you need to do this song, Don't Pay the Ferryman, because maybe
it's usually not in the karaoke repertoire. Usually Lady in Red is, so you can usually find that. I've seen it listed. But are you going to Podfest again this year?
Yes, I'm very excited. Yes.
I will be there next week.
Yes, I'm super excited. I'm hoping to meet you. I ended up attending Q4 presentation from Podmatch, and they ended up supplying some tickets. And so I was like, ooh, nice. Yeah, I might actually do that. So we live right here in Florida, so it's a drive down. So I am very much looking forward to it. And the gentleman that I met that we did karaoke together, he's going to be there as well. And my husband's coming with me. So I'm super excited for my husband to just understand the podcasting space, or, he has no clue what I do all day. He always says to me when he leaves for work, "What are you going to do today?" And I'm like, "I'm going to work." But I don't think that he understands work, like work from home work. I'm like, "You see the money coming in, right?" So people aren't just paying me to listen to their podcasts. I'm making them better. It makes me laugh, but I am excited to be there. Does your wife join in on any of that with you? Does she understand the podcast world?
Well,
I'm sure she does by now.
if you go to podcastwidow.com, my wife understands, podcasting. She's been involved with it because of me since 2004. So she knows it's the place that sends me off to all these different shows.
Yeah.
She was at like one of the very first podcast events back in 2005. So
Okay.
she got to meet all of the podcasters. And back then it was a very eclectic group of people.
I'm sure.
Yes. But she does appreciate the podcast space. She listens to podcasts, mostly Joyce
Mm-hmm.
Meyer and folks like that.
Yeah.
Creflo Dollar. Those are the ones that she's
Yeah.
normally listening to.
Okay. So when you turn the song on and you're listening to it, sorry, coming back to your song that we picked, don't pay the ferryman.
Mhm.
Are there any lyrics that stick out to you per se?
Just the whole part about don't pay him ahead of time, the whole messaging of don't settle before you get your service provided. That's part of it, and that goes back to Clash of the Titans was the same thing. Got to watch out on the paying the ferryman.
So I'm not familiar with Clash of the Titans.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to fill me in on a little backstory, where does the ferryman come in? What is the story roughly?
So the ferryman is about the river Styx
Okay.
and taking you from this side to the other world, the netherworld.
Got it.
In the book, the character has to cross the river to get to the other side, to get to where Medusa's lair is. And long story short, but the ferryman is the key to getting you across the river Styx. So the ferryman has this.
Got
It's not
it.
something that Christopher came up with. He takes a lot of history stuff and brings it in and into his songs, I should say. There are more stories, and it's the hooded old man, which is kind of like the ferryman is kind of like the Grim Reaper. It has that when people
Got it.
picture what the ferryman is, it's really like the Grim Reaper without the sickle.
Got it.
And in some cases, the ferryman actually does have a sickle and he's on the boat, depending on what story it is.
Interesting. Okay. So that makes more sense. Okay. I didn't know if it had like maybe some underlying, or maybe there was like a situation where that had kind of played out for you where you were like, "Oh my God, I paid the ferryman." Like, figuratively, I paid the ferryman before, they followed through with what they were going to do.
Well, that's just life in general, right? You want to make sure
Right.
you've got a firm contract, and you want to make sure you're paying for the service you're actually getting.
Yeah.
Which that happens every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you pay someone. I used to have a roommate, and we used to joke he was a painter, and we used to joke any clients that paid him up front full, they weren't getting their job done.
Oh.
He was
already paid.
notorious. They're like, you don't pay Scott his full amount until he gets that job done. Because you pay him full, he's going to go out, not come back the next day, finish up the little trim stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there's a lot of people out there, unfortunately, that do that. Once they get paid, they stop thinking about you as the client. They're on to the next person they get money from.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the lyric. It's a lot of times I won't look at the lyrics until I had an album for a month or so. And then I go, oh, that's what they're saying. I'll have lyritosis, right? It'll be something I'm like, oh, I didn't know that's what they said.
I think that's the best thing about the 80s is that so many of us, like now my daughter will pull up Apple Music and it's got all the lyrics right there for her and she can sing along and learn the words, which is sometimes good and sometimes bad. I wish she wouldn't, because then some of the bad stuff would kind of, go over her head, but whatever. But I think that is one of the funniest things about the 80s and the 90s is that we just really didn't have a clue what some of the words were. And honestly, I'm okay with it. And I like singing the wrong words. And, I make up my own story in my own head about what they're saying. Well, if anybody is listening and they do not know Don't Pay the Ferryman, you guys, it's always on the Apple playlist. It's on the Spotify playlist. And Rob said that this video was pretty good, or it was really good for its time. So
It was good for its time. I don't know. I haven't watched the video in a long time, but I remember at the time where some of the videos were just bands playing
Mhm.
live. This was one of those ones which was a little bit more
Yeah.
than that. But again, that could be selective memory at this
Yeah,
point
right?
from 40 years ago, right? This came out it was actually 40 years ago. Came out in 83, January of
Oh my gosh.
83, when the video came up.
So it's
Yeah.
really like a 40th celebration for the song. This
Yes.
episode. Happy birthday, Don't Pay the Ferryman. 40 years. Well, Rob, I have really appreciated your time and I love everything that you shared. Guys, if you are going out to do some karaoke, pull up Lady in Red by Krista Berg. You got to shout out to Rob Walsh, do it in his honor, and have a good time. Again, if you don't know the song, pull it up, listen to it. It's a good song just to have like in your back pocket because it is something that is so familiar in life in general.
And if I'm ever doing karaoke again and I do that and you're in the room, run for the doors. Run away, run away.
It's a good time for a bathroom break, a cigarette break. It's time to go home. Leave the building, people. Rob's about to make your ears bleed.
Tiffany, thank you so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Yes, I'm looking forward to meeting you in a couple of days, I guess.
Yeah, I'll be out there a week from today. I will be in Orlando at Podfest. So hopefully if anyone's there,
Awesome.
hopefully we had a good meeting and one of us is going to be sad because one of our football teams will no longer be in the playoffs a week from now.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I might have to send you an email because you guys, this Sunday, Chiefs versus Jags. So it's on.
Okay.
It's on. One of us owes the other one a Coke at Podfest. All right. Well, Rob, thank you so much for your time. And if you guys want to check anything out, remember, check out in the show notes. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and all of Rob's memories to this beat.
Well, that was fun, wasn't it? You never know what rabbit holes we'll get to go down and explore. Were you reminded of anything? Or anyone? Share what it was with me in a review. Honestly, the reviews don't do me any favors other than knowing people like you are listening to this podcast. Insert cheesy wink. However, the ratings do help, so leave me 5 stars. You know you wanna. This podcast was produced by Virtual You, supporting you in all things podcasting. To connect or check me out on social media, I know you're just gonna stalk me. But see the show notes, as always, for details. Can't wait to dive into my next guest's memories with a beat. Hit subscribe now. You don't want to miss the next episode.